Ask them a question. Let's see what they answer.
So not as quick a pace as last week's episode, but episode 5 of season 3 from does join up some of the overall stories. Henry's arrival in the town, being the main one, reaches the conclusion that we pretty much knew that it would. The Fatima stuff seems to be moving along nicely, but as always, I'm Al, this is the Geek In Review. Thanks for taking the time to choose to watch the video, and if you haven't done it already, hit subscribe. So like every episode this season, it picks up right where the others left off. Boyd manages to save Randall and get him inside Colony House, but we don't actually see the rescue, which I thought was a little bit odd. But you know he's going to be pissed when he wakes up, and what Boyd has done could have divided the town, or could divide the town. If he's willing to leave one of his own behind, he could do it again. And this episode certainly does explore division and conflict in the town, and I'm going to get to that later on. Christy, Kenny and Jade make it back to the town, noticing the ambulance straight away. Boyd fills them in that Tabitha is back and how she got out in the first place, which seems to pique Jade's interest. Back at Colony House, Henry now has to fit in, and they don't know where Victor is, so we don't get the big reunion just yet, but it does come later on in the episode. Victor and Sarah are still looking for the puppet Jasper and are going to the tunnels, but they need supplies first, so of course they go to Colony House. Donna breaks the news to Victor that his father's here, and Victor, of course, doesn't believe it. I kind of thought this was how Victor was going to react, as something like this has never happened as far as we know after 40 years in the town. I said in my video about episode 4 this was probably going to derail Victor's quest for Jasper, and it seems that I was right because it does slow it down and it doesn't really go anywhere this week. Donna fills in Henry on what Victor is like and what he's been up to, and shows him his room, and despite my suspicions, judging on what he says here and how he seems to react throughout this episode, he really is Victor's dad, so I guess I was wrong on that theory. Tabitha reunites with the rest of her family and tells them how she got out and how she came back to the town. As this is going on, Jade crashes the party in his own frantic style, and he doesn't really seem to know about the faraway trees or how they work, and wants to try and use them to find the lighthouse. Now, if you watched my Tabitha theory video from a few weeks ago, I did say that I thought a few people in the town were going to try and recreate how she escaped in order to, well, escape themselves. And this pretty much happens throughout this episode, and they explore it and get it out the way. I mean, come on man, that ending. We'll talk about that in a minute. Given what's happened with Tabitha coming back after seemingly getting out, the town has a big meeting about her return and want to hear her story. Not everyone in the town, like Jade, seems to know everything, and the lack of communication between the characters in this show has been a major complaint and criticised online among the From fandom, and quite rightly so. So it seems that the writers are maybe addressing it this week. She retells the tale again, but some of them ask if she did try and tell people on the outside where all these missing people were, or tried to contact any of the sort of people that might be connected to them, like family members, friends, that kind of thing. And there's a bit of a turn against her that she didn't try and do more or reach out more once she managed to escape. But as Henry and the new arrival cop points out, it's an impossible story to believe because you've got no proof of anything and you sound like an absolute ranting crazy person if you try. It turns out that I was right, so I got a theory wrong and I got a theory right. A good portion of the townspeople want at least to try and recreate how she escaped. And again, these trees can drop you off anywhere, so I thought they were maybe going to thin the herd of the cast of the townspeople this week, and they didn't really go that far. Fatima is still getting her odd eating habits, but goes back to food this week, or rotten food rather than rotten people. She does sort of get discovered by Ellis when he walks in on her doing it in the greenhouse, but they don't really get into it too much, which I thought was a little bit odd, but I guess they're saving that for the rest of the season. Henry finally meets his son when he's out on a walk with Ethan, and Ethan is actually telling him what Victor is like. But Henry does make one great observation, and it's kind of weird that no one, or at least no one I've seen, had pointed it out, or that I didn't notice it either. There's a big motel sign in the town, but there's no motel. So think about that for a second. Does it mean that at some point in the past the town was bigger before? I wonder if they're going to expand on that. Now, as I mentioned, they run into Victor when they're out their walk, and this is the big reunion that we've been waiting for since the start of the season. And it really works here. As I said, that scene and the scene earlier on with Sarah are the absolute two standouts for me. And I guess they had to do this, and that's why they slowed the pace of this episode down, because if they had the reunion in some sort of frantic action sequence, then you wouldn't get this big sort of emotional moment. Jade and Tabitha go to explore the faraway trees with the bottles and start pulling them down. Jade discovers that they're all filled with bits of paper with 4-digit numbers, which he guesses must be dates or years, but not every number seems to be a past, present, or even future date, as one of them, if it is a year, would be 600 years in the future. He tells Tabitha that he went down to the tunnels as well, and he's seen the kids and the symbol and found out what it means with a hole in the cave ceiling. But he doesn't know how any of this connects to anything else, and he points out that someone took their time to leave these bottles with numbers in them, so it must mean something, or at least connect to something. While they're doing this, Dale shows up, deciding to try his luck with a faraway tree, and we see him go in, and as we've been warned since the faraway trees were brought into the show, he ends up materialising into a solid wall. It's the wall of the public swimming pool, which is in the main street of the town, and obviously it gets a bit of an audience. We've heard that this is possible, but this is just the first time that we've seen it, and it really reminds the risk and really enforces the risk to the townspeople that Boyd brings up. Of course, he's got no choice but to try and kill him, but he hesitates, and I thought it was because of the gesture that Dale made with his hands for a moment, but instead he wanted to get the message across of just how dangerous these trees are and the fact that they shouldn't use them. As I said at the start of the video, while this episode was a much slower pace than the last week's, some of the conflicts in the town started to come to a head. The show is finally making the townspeople talk to each other, and yeah, that has been a major gripe online, the fact that if these people did just communicate a little bit more rather than try and solve their own mysteries, they'd get a little bit further than they are at the moment. And yeah, I agree with that, and I'm glad that they're starting to do it. I just wonder though where all this is going, because we're now halfway through season 3. We didn't really get any further this week with Elgin's visions or Jade's either, but if Jade is right and everything connects, you have to wonder how these two different parts of the story are going to join up. The story didn't move as quickly as I'd like this week, but we're only halfway through the season. So there's a lot of threads they can pick up for the rest of the season, but at the moment the whole Victor Jasper quest seems to be the only clear one, along with whatever they're doing with Fatima's baby. Which, when you think about it, is kind of weird. What are they going to do with the rest of the townspeople, and what are they going to focus on for the rest of the season? I want to know what you guys think about that, so let me know in the comments below, or you can reach out to me on Twitter at The Geeks Reviews. I am really curious how the rest of this season is going to get filled out, and if they're going to build on new things or maybe go back to previous things. There's a lot of explanations here, and we haven't had stuff like the talisman explored or any of the visions of Martin since the end of season 2, so I hope they decide to answer that, but as always, we're going to have to wait and see. If you've made it this far, leave a like on the video, and if you haven't done it already, subscribe to the channel. And my name's Al, thanks for watching.